With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
Good afternoon if you're in Australia. If you're in the UK and you've heard that, it's like, I have to stop taking those Quaaludes with that whiskey. It's morning in the UK, by the way. It's 9 after 6 in the morning, and I'm sure there is somewhere there's some blue sky. We're on the Gold Coast in Australia too, by the way, in Queensland. And at the moment, we're about to hit the year 2000, and it's 9 after 4. In New South Wales and Victoria, it's 9 after 5. The weekend has begun for some. It just feels like a game show, doesn't it? Just everything's happening. Everyone's happy. And the same thing with Mauritius. It's all happening. The prospects of the Great British Giveaway deal. We actually need Nigel, because he reminds me of a celebrity game show host in waiting. Here you are. Do you want the car or do you want Chagos? Anyway, the Great British Giveaway deal to Mauritius seems to change from day to day. Now, the US stance, whether it's Trump or the State Department, is often contradictory. To explain the latest developments, Kate Jones will join us, who is a White House correspondent, journalist, author and historian. Kate is the North American editor of World Media UK USA, CYQ6 Corp, covering geopolitics, economics, technology and defence. Kate, thank you very much for joining us. I actually think we need Nigel Farage, because truly he reminds me of a game show host. Do you want the car or would you like to have Chagos Islands? How do you feel about Nigel before we get into the nitty-gritty stuff? We probably need your microphone on. That's that button that says turn me on. That one? There we are. Look at that. There we are. We're going well. We look, what I might do is just fill in. This is called a filler as Kate panics behind the scenes. There we are. Look at that. Here I am by myself again. Kate will join us in a second. When we hear Kate, we will get our studio guy to flick back to Kate. We have.
Yes.
Now,
Yeah, sorry, on Farage.
Yes.
So Farage actually was pretty passionate about Chagos Islands not being turned over, and was very engaged with the Republicans on this. So, and regardless of what you might feel or not feel, he was actively engaged in not turning over Chagos. But I think that there are multiple different disputed issues in this. It's a diplomatic, an economic, and also a military question. And certainly, I think in particular with Iran, and also this discussion about Greenland, which is more related to geometry and hypersonic missile defense in the future. I think it's just that distances are shortening in terms of missile, the delay on the amount of time in which you can intercept, but also the distance in which they can fly is shifting, and it's causing a certain level of panic. And so that is why Greenland, and that is also why Chagos Island suddenly has become a very sharp question mark. If you can imagine right now, the United States has to get agreement from the United Kingdom to strike Iran. In time, it might need to ask Mauritius, and that's rather a different thing, isn't it?
I think it might be, because Mauritius then would consult with China. And wouldn't you love to be a fly on the wall, although you might find yourself dinner? So anyway, look, the issues are escalating at the moment, aren't they? Can you just tell me if the UK has blocked the use of Chagos for a strike on Iran?
It has been blocked. However, that was a discussion previously, and many things have moved subsequently. But the bigger block on attacking Iran is really the Middle Eastern states themselves. And the question is, at some point, I believe at some point, if Iran were to overcook, it might have a large sort of suicide attack on everyone. And that means longer range missile attacks on Saudi Arabia, UAE, Israel, of course, and all of its neighbors. And so being able to defend against that's tricky and also expensive. So I believe that some of this is really delayed for that very reason. It's about can you adequately and rapidly enough defend all of these states, along with also having that permission to use your B1s, B2s, B52s, your ISR assets that are coming out of Chagos, and that permission required from the UK. So I'm not entirely sure if it's a full no. It was a no before, and maybe it's not now. Who knows what the next maneuver will be, because the threat situation changes rapidly there too.
There's other reports, we've had reports in which we have been reporting on, plus either side, because we do that, we're very nice people, but their reports are that and they did a survey there too. Now, who knows how correct that survey was, but the vast majority of those living in Iran do not want a regime change. So let's just go with me on this part for a second. If they don't want a regime change, and don't forget there is an information operation at play here, which they do everywhere just to make sure they get their message across and they have the support from their respective countries. However, if they don't want a regime change, why are they going in there at all? Do you think there are other parties at play here, other countries at play here that are encouraging the US and the coalition of the willing to engage Iran?
So I don't think we have any ability to survey what the people of Iran believe. That's impossible to know. We can only really look at the mobilization of people and the percentage in mobilization, and we still can't really, you couldn't really know from that. As far as the other things at play, of course, there are other things at play. The ballistic missile capability of Iran is improving. Israel is, of course, fearful of that, as are the states around it. Again, I mentioned Saudi Arabia, UAE, all of those countries are under threat from attack by Iran in an advanced program, a ballistical missile capability. So that is an influence for everyone. And I think that pressure is acutely felt by all those nations. Also, the instability that is provoked by the Iranian regime with its militias, with its influence in Baghdad, that continues to be a concern for all of the countries involved. In terms of internal influence, yes, of course, the Israelis are able to influence inside Iran. There are other nodes, of course, like Russia, China, but in terms of Iran's behavior, I think it is very Iranian. So um, it has had a long-term objective of getting a nuclear weapon. That has not changed. They're still objecting to that on red lines. There's a delay now in which I think they have a week to have more negotiations about this, but the red lines are firm. The US does not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. The US does not want this ballistic missile development. Iran wants both. So those are tough red lines when neither one can cross them.
Do you think there will be, I mean, actually, two parts. So just do this first one. You mentioned Israel. How come they have so much power? Why do they have so much influence with regards to Iran? They have enough trouble on their own, in their own backyard. So why? Because illuminate me, because I'm a bit stumped here. I've got no idea. Well, I do have an idea, but I want your idea on why Israel has so much power. Why? Because we know that they have their own issues. To lead the rest of the world into a war with Iran, and not only are you going to have a war with Iran, you're going to have a war then probably very likely with Russia, because they support Iran. Also going to have a war with other countries nearby. So the tact of following what Israel is suggesting and pushing, and they are. how come they have so much power? Why are they? Why are they? Tell me this. Why is the US following a lot of the wishes, if not the entire wish list of Israel?
The US is acting in its own self interest, as most of the
Really?
countries in that region are. I mean, this is persistently the case. It's about
Mm,
balance of power. And while the Israelis can push, and I believe that over Christmas, Netanyahu was pushing for attacks on their ballistic missile capabilities, that did not occur, did it? And they even have issues with being able to defend against it and would still volunteer to end that program because it's an existential threat to the future. Iran, of course, has tons of influence in that region because it too is working to balance its own power. Each one does things to balance power. That means funding Hamas for the attacks that, I mean, indirectly occurred on January 7th, but also the Shia militias that put pressure on Iran that actually are probably more of a threat to Iran, even to
mm,
Hezbollah in Lebanon.
mm,
And then for the Saudis, it's strikes from Yemen from the Houthis that they fear. So each of these nodes are nodes of power, and each of these countries has nodes of power. And really, you're looking at how does that balance. When you get to balance, people stop fighting.
mm,
Um, People are always trying to get an advantage and an edge, and each one is acting in its own self-interest. If the interests of Israel align with the United States, then the US will align with it. It's kind of a simple factor. But you also have to remember it is not just Israel. It's the each one of these countries has a similar interest in not having attacks on its own soil, not having Houthi attacks, and not having an Iranian excess of power in these types of sort of networks.
mm. Is the West prepared for a war with Iran? Because, sure, we saw the shock and awe, which they're talking about again, the shock and awe of the US might. And if you go back a few years to the war on terror, I still remember George Bush and Storm and Norman and all that. I've got a very clear memory of that. And I believed it all. Then it came out later on, which was acknowledged by legacy media, also mainstream media, that Bell Pottinger was part of the information operation. They were paid $550 million in those days, pretty close to $1 billion nowadays. They were paid to provide information that, again, led the rest of the world to believe that they had these weapons of mass destruction. We know that the rest is history. So back to the original question, are we prepared then for a war with Iran? Because they do have missiles that can reach the UK, they have missiles that can reach the US. But as I said, you don't want to have Russia deciding then to side with Iran, and especially if they got the naval, not naval warfare, naval military manoeuvres happening close by. You don't want that happening at all. So again, is the West prepared for a war with Iran? Because it's not going to be anything like anything else. They can retaliate, and then we go to the part I think you might have mentioned about the terrorism and the huge amount of technology, if you could ever have technology making a bomb or whatever. But they are very good, we believe, at creating mayhem in civilian populations. Now, if you look at the US, also 40 million illegals, many unaccountable, could very well be, and it has been mentioned by the State Department as possible terrorists. Again, is the West prepared for a war with Iran, and are they prepared for a war that will realise many losses?
So I don't imagine that this is the sort of war that anybody would see coming from an Iranian conflict. Everything I see has shown that there is an avoidance of war. Otherwise, this attack would have already occurred. There's there is full capability to attack Iran and the ballistic sites, and that has not been done. The U.S. has held back, and I think the bigger fear is if there is a failure of the state, then there might be action by the state that was sudden and unpredictable. And but I think that objective is to negotiate out of this one. That is, all signs are pointing to that. However, I think there are tipping points at which the risk is too high of some sort of attack, generalized attack against the neighbors, were the regime to believe it was going to fall. As far as what would a war with Iran look like, um, I wouldn't. I would imagine that there might be some bombings of these sites, perhaps this Israeli activity internally, certainly a large population overtaking the streets in the capital. And I think it's possible that the military itself could turn away from its current leader. So I don't think that we're really looking at that kind of destabilization, large scale war, and more advanced regional conflict on its own. I think it's really a question over what the population of Iran does, whether or not instability in the regime causes some sort of other internal controls to shift. I think there is always going to be concern of things like civil war inside if there was a full toppling of the regime. And then there is future concern because the country has been led in by authoritarians and without decentralized control for so long. It's hard to imagine implementing some other system and having some other structure. Also, if it were to fail, it's possible that you just have another leader that is quite similar to take the place. So I don't, but I still don't see large scale war. I think the higher risk with Iran is a sort of semi suicidal series of strikes against its neighbors to go out with a bang, if you like.
The other thing is also the Russia bit, because I mean this and Russia do their war games close by, and if you have the this US Armada, which is it's gigantic. I understand that that Trump is creating some fear amongst those in Iran that we've got 430,000 ships out there and more coming. But if you have Russia involved, and they do their war games, and the reports are they'll be doing war games at about the same time as if there is a conflict. How would you stop a conflict between Russia and the US if they are in the same area, and one's doing war games, the other is doing war? And one which is doing the war games, is very sympathetic to Iran and the regime there. You'd have to be very careful, and that's why I'm very interested in your ideas on they're all heading towards a peace or talking peace because of the enormous loss that would follow. But if it did kick off, and you did have losses on either side caused by the US or by the Russians, it changes the whole dynamics of it, doesn't it? And that's and even though you're talking about peace, the world was yesterday was on fire with that. It's probably going to happen within 24, 48 hours. Now, whether that's just coming from within to create fear, which it was working, but whether that's enough to deter a conflict. And you mentioned if Iran does strike first, and they could, then negotiations are finished, and then you're going to have a very large war. It's not going to just be with Iran. It's going to be with Russia supporting them. We don't want that, do we?
Yeah, I can't see a war with Russia, and I am certain that the United States and Russia are having lengthy discussions behind closed doors. There are diplomatic channels. I don't think it's in Russia's interest either, and they're probably also looking over at Iran with great concern. In terms of, I believe, are you talking about wargaming versus exercises? Because military exercises, that's ships in place, versus wargaming being generally, it's the computer and the phone. So
Well, it's a bit of
I
both.
think if I wasn't aware of them doing military exercises there, but if that is the case, yeah, of course that is a heightened tension. But I really do not imagine that Russia is not involved in this conversation. It may also be looking over Iran with similar concerns, and then you're looking at what's the outcome afterwards. But the bigger question for Iran is, will it topple from the interior? Will it remain as it has? And this is just one more hiccup, and all carries on. Will it be some sort of attack on the ballistic sites at some point, whether that's this year, next year, a year, tomorrow? Uh, we're not really sure.
Mm,
We're all waiting to see, but I do not think anything is predetermined at this
mm,
stage.
mm,
I think it is going to be incremental changes that then have global reactions. And I do believe that everyone is in that conversation and no one is left out. So
mm,
my concern for some sort of global war is zero, in terms of Russia. I also think that this is a highly protective force, and I think that the number of ships is a show of support for all of the nations around Iran.
mm,
Um, it's for all of its neighbors, and to prevent that sort of an attack, to be able to have the interceptor capability in particular.
mm,
Unless the United States actually does go out and make a strike, again, possible, don't know. But I do think that what you're seeing is the oil market reaction. The oil markets have reacted with the assumption that there will be an attack. That also feeds other assumptions. There are indicators from inside Iran. I've heard things that there's an imagination that there will be attacks within some short. It was supposed to
mm,
be right after the Board of Peace, but obviously that did not occur. Um, that was at least one of the hot tips I had. But look at the oil markets and carefully looking at those, telling you it's going to go up to, I think that the belief was $75 a barrel if there was an attack, and then if it was prolonged beyond 5 days, it's expect 80. These are the sorts of concerns that you get jitters in the markets. Those translate into jitters in general. Nobody really is sure. People are hanging on each of these actions, whether it's an Iranian word or a US word or uh,
mm,
somewhere else. But there are things we just don't know that occur in a skiff, and those conversations we are not privy to, and we're not getting messaged back.
mm.
So
It
that's
makes,
probably the tough part for all of us.
and it does make the Chagos Islands, including Diego Garcia, all the more important. And there's not just people think Chagos Islands is a couple of dots on the ocean. There's 60 of them, and huge amount of minerals and stuff. Where do you? First of all, I can't understand why they would let this go, and I think Starmer is under a fair bit of pressure at the moment. But you can't keep saying yes, no, as Donald has been doing. Yes, no, no. We support. No, we don't support. Peter Mendelsohn. What do you think? Because he's come out. He looks a bit slippery, doesn't he? And Peter Mandelson, besides his friendship with Epstein, he also he was lobbying his lobbying firm Global Counsel in 2010. Who are these? Who are his clients, and what about the miners in the area?
Well, going back to the importance of Chagos Island, look at it from the military perspective. It's a multi-domain site in which you have a deep water port, but you also have long runways. So it's a unique location for things like defending against and striking places like Iran. But it has a nice long runway. You can do your refueling for air refuel. You can have ISR capabilities. You've got B1s, B2s, B52s, and a deep water port. And that is what makes that super critical. Again, this question mark over asking the United Kingdom permission is one thing, asking Mauritius and potentially, that's China, is another. And I think the reality of that has come to light as a more important factor suddenly because of Iran. And prior to that, it was more of a diplomatic thought process. And now it's more of a, well, hang on, look at this lease. What can be negotiated in terms of what State Department came out with, and then the president has been consistent. In fact, State Department had came out with a statement, but I don't know what was behind that or how that decision was made. But it certainly was in conflict with what the president had to say. In terms of Mendelsohn, I don't know. That's an I don't know. Uh, about his associations and the mining piece.
Interesting. And I see poor old, we'll talk to our next guest about Andrew. He's in deep doo-doos. Maybe he could be on the front line heading into Iran, probably on a missile. Is anyone else, by the way, laying claim to the islands? Has anyone else said, "Oh, we'll take it"?
Other than private individuals saying I'll buy it, I have heard that. I no. I think this is a pretty well writ and thought out turnover. However, it maybe has changed. While there were always pressures to not give it away and sensible arguments not to, I haven't heard the deeper argument as to why to give it away, aside from historic. Sort of, I guess this is anti-colonial movement. But I don't really understand the depth of that. I do understand the reasons to hold on to Chagos, and I understand the risk is significant. If it went to Mauritius and you had to ask permission again, what would the Chinese say? But 100-year lease, is that enough? I don't know. So
I just think the whole thing is starting to look very, very what's the word? Looks very much like a cluster duck. If you could understand what I'm probably saying there, but it looks very weird. Can you just tell me where do you think this will end? I mean, because at the moment it could go anyway. Do you think that the UK will hand it straight back to Mauritius, or do you think the UK will say made a mistake, or do you think Starmer will get into trouble because it looks like he may have misled Parliament? His reasoning was, "Oh, we're going to lose this court case anyway," and everyone went, "Yep, okay, we believe you." Where do you think this will end up?
So I think we all just need to get out a bingo card right now and just fill in some of those squares, and we can put, will Iran be bombed in the next 24 hours, the next week? Will Chagos Island be handed over? Will the United States have hypersonic missile defense in Greenland, and who will own it? Will there be ice cutters? How will the Arctic go? Will Russia and Ukraine war end? So I think we need a bingo card.
I hate bingo. So, and we'll go to Vegas. I'll have red.
The roulette table will also work for this problem set.
I think Mauritius would go for red. I mean, Kate, if somebody wants to find out more about what you do, how do they do that?
Yeah, we have this new magazine, The Context. So really plugging that. We're online, but we also have a print copy that's coming out as a quarterly. Otherwise, on your program, of course, I love to come on, especially in the middle of the night. It's fantastic. There's no traffic noise or ambulances. But then also, I'm out podcasting on the economy, and I do have letters that I do on geopolitics and geoeconomics. Yeah, it's harder to get a hold of those, but I will try and get them up on a site so you can read.
It's going out night clubbing has its advantages. You come home, you do a gig with us, and then go to bed. Kate, how we wish when we were younger, maybe not anymore. Do you ever sleep, by the way?
I do. I do. I really enjoy sleeping, and I was asleep about an hour ago.
I can't do that. If I go to sleep, it's like, don't go near me when I wake up. Kate, always a pleasure. Look forward to next time. This is The World Today.
We're today's news talk, The World Today.
Incredible. I was sitting home last night after finishing. Actually, we didn't do a show yesterday. We had meetings and stuff. So sitting home, and Basil Valentine sends me this message through, and it said, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has been arrested. And it was like, oh my lordy lord, my wife who loves the monarchy. Oh my lordy lord, it's like because she loves the Queenie and all those. Just very, very one of her favourites was the Queen. Anyway, my wife's whole world was coming apart just about because Prince Andrew was being arrested. We're going to find out more. He's now been released from custody after being arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. Oh, really? The sex allegations surrounding his association with Jeffrey Epstein are not relevant to this arrest. Hello. Ian Pelham-Turner specialises in the royal family commentary, politics and promoting British issues across the world. He worked behind the scenes at number 10 Downing Street. What if you saw the cat there? Creating media opportunities for Prime Minister John Major's government. Ian has worked extensively over the past 14 years with Australian media outlets and just about understands what we're saying. Ian, how are you? You probably need to turn the microphone on, Ian. That's the one there. There we are. So relaxed, and you just. What about that? No, we still have it off. What I might do is just go to. I'll just go to a full frame here. If they would just push. Thank you very much. Yeah, Andrew, Prince Andrew. I would like to refer to him as Prince Andrew, but no longer Prince Andrew. He's in a lot of trouble. We still have no microphone there for Ian. So Cam, if you want to just pop in and maybe help Ian, and that way we can continue a conversation, because I want to find out some of the things I want to find out about Prince Andrew. What's the latest in the story, for example? What about the charges? Why haven't they involved the sex charges? I mean, it's all to do with being naughty in public office and probably divulging confidential information and stuff like that. So we need to find out these things. And there we have Ian is now with us. Ian, thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
You've done enough of this. Do you sometimes think, when you have to do a filler as something's happening behind the scenes, sometimes it can be harder than it looks, can't it?
Well, honestly, at the moment, I mean, nobody was more surprised than me, because I was having this wonderful sleep yesterday morning. And then the phone rings at 8:05 in the morning, 5 minutes after Andrew had been arrested by India, to ask, could I get onto them straight away. So I think when you're working with the royal family, you have to be really prepared to talk 24 hours a day across the world. I think that the reality at the moment is total shock in Britain. What is happening? Although there actually, Andrew may be asked to actually give an interview by the police, nobody thought that he would be arrested. So, as I say, when you sit in the world of royalty, you never know what's going to happen next.
Yeah, it's a real shock to the entire system. But charges have not yet been laid, or that's what they're telling us.
Yeah.
Can you tell me if you think there were sufficient grounds for arrest, or do you think this was a bit of a show and tell? Look what we've done. But if I can't understand how you can arrest someone without having sufficient grounds for an arrest.
I think, who knows? I mean, this is ongoing as we speak. At the same time, I think the reality is the royals want to put across this feeling that they are very upset with Andrew. Arrest him on his birthday. What was, I think, a very strange coincidence, or not. To actually, whether it was coming out of Buckingham Palace that King Charles was totally surprised that this arrest was going to happen, that Prince William was very surprised that this was going to happen. Do I believe that? No. I think what we are seeing at the moment is a play out, as you so rightly say, to sort of show that the royal family are concerned, that Andrew has received another slap on the wrist for doing what he's doing, and the world goes on. And I think the royal family feel that that might be one way of actually dealing with the issue. Do I think that's going to happen? No, because there's too much conjecture, there's too much problems with this whole story at the moment. And as more details come out from the Epstein files as well, Who knows what's going to happen next?
Can you, because you worked at 10 Downing Street, you understand the machinations behind the scenes. What would the when I mean obviously Starmer and the office would have been aware that Andrew was going to be invited down to have a chat to a few policemen. But what would have been the atmosphere behind the scenes at 10 Down? Would it be just business as usual, or would there be a great concern?
One word comes straight away: fear. What is going to happen next? Because the Starmer government, quite honestly, it's been a government in waiting since it became a government. You know, and so this latest peccadillos about what Andrew's been up to is just another worry for Starmer at the same time. And I think, you know, the reality at the moment is who is going to say what's going to happen next? Because in reality now, because he is a commoner now, not a member of the royal family anymore, he could be extradited to America as well if America asks for it. And so then how does Starmer deal with something like that as well?
It's interesting you mentioned maybe extradited. First of all, they have to do something within their own borders. A lot of talk, a lot of 3 million pages or files, whatever you want to call it. Many have been redacted. But the world is jumping up and down what a terrible person, and Epstein was a terrible person. But not much else is happening. So again, I'm wondering whether this is just, a bit of theatre to say that we're taking appropriate action. However, there'll be no more appropriate action taken because it's all very well inviting him over to have a conversation to the American police, but they've got to do something with their own first of all. And at this stage, I haven't seen anything. Maybe you could illuminate me. Am I missing something?
No, I mean, I think you're perfectly correct, quite honestly. I think this is theatre. And that's my sort of personal feeling. I'm trying to show the royal family against what Andrew has done. And so this is the perfect theatre. You know, I mean, for me, probably the most shocking thing that I've seen in the past 20 photograph, and, Andrew was coming back from Aylesbury, where he was held by the police, by Thames Valley Police. He looked totally shocked. And I think that photograph said a lot to me because it looked like he had suddenly realized something now was seriously wrong. I think before he thought he could get away with anything, but now I think he's suddenly realizing that the look on his face was of absolute shock. In fact, it almost looked like absolute terror that was going to happen next.
Yeah, it wasn't a good look, was it? I mean, I see that Fergie stood by his side from the UAE, of course, because she's there to get some sunshine and get out of the heat, which is a strange place to go to get out of the heat. But she had to get away, and all the stories that we hear and the people read about it in the tabloids, some are a little more forthright than others, and then whether it's independent media or socials, there's always this conversation about Andrew and about Epstein. The look for the royal family, and even though Charles is, his response seems to sort of imply that he endorses what happened, except for a conversation with the police, and even though Andrew is looking shell-shocked, no charges have been laid just yet, or what we know, so nothing really has happened. How does the English public react to this? Do they just think, here we go again, one rule for us, one rule for the elite?
I think the British public are getting more and more astonished at what's going on with the royal family right now. Sympathy for Charles, obviously because of his cancer, and for Kate because of her cancer. But I behind the scenes as well, let's take down young people, more young people now do not want a monarchy anymore. You know, and Republic, which is this anti-monarchy group, which is to be investigated in the first place, they are even stronger. in Britain at the same. That there is a feeling now in Britain: do we really need a monarchy or not anymore? And with Charles, yes, there is a lot of sympathy for Charles. I think the problem is that he is not in control of this situation anymore because of all the allegations coming out of Charles. He must be wondering what's been happening next. No doubt behind the scenes, he's been having talks with his brother about, is there any more skeletons in the cupboard to come out? And obviously, Andrew just can't remember, because he probably allegedly was been involved with so many things that he may not be able to remember what all the things that have been photographed with at the same time. So I think, right now, I think the British public uh, that this that they either send him to America. There needs to be an addressed situation on all of this, and I think with King Charles, he has always really been regarded as someone who can never make up his mind. William is the one behind the throne who is really pushing for everything to sort of happen nowadays. So we will see I think, over the next few weeks. But who knows? As I say, this is a rolling, fast news situation already. He may very well charge. Who knows?
Got to keep reading the Mirror. um, Terrible. Sorry, I was joking about that, by the way. What about? Do you know much about the documents that were passed to Epstein? And it's really interesting. And I think you would agree that no one's looking at the sex allegations and the impropriety with very young children, or not children, but young people under the age, and nothing's been really mentioned about that in this brief. It's all about these documents. Do you have any idea what they are?
I don't really. I mean, he basically, it happened when he was a trade envoy. Apparently, he got some confidential notes sent to him, allegedly 5 minutes later. He passed them on to Epstein. And so, as a trade envoy, then he's obviously under restrictions, DNAs, and NDA at the same time. And so I think whatever they were, it's never made public anyway. What these were, but going away of the sex angles as well. Probably they're hoping that none of that will come out to actually don't push the sex angle as well, because of all the apparently sex goings on at Sandringham, when Andrew was up there at the same time. These sex parties that allegedly were as well. You never know with the royal family. As I say, what's going to happen next at the moment? It's like a live scene from Netflix.
It's a bit like Caligula. And you just wonder, the parties, if there were any birthday parties, what they did with the candles. I've just got. I'm sorry, I'm being a bit brash here, but they are. They're terrifying and quite salacious stories. Just quickly on Mandelson, he hasn't been arrested. We believe he hasn't been arrested. And there's just a police investigation. What do you think? I mean, this again, I'm asking you to look into a cup of tea here and look at the future, and using probably your knowledge and your gut feel. Do you think Mandelson will be charged at all, or do you think, because if you look at Andrew, they're focusing on the documents, they're not focusing on the impropriety with children. So if there's no documents, maybe Chagos might be something there, but generally he really hasn't got a whole lot to hang his hat on, except for the alleged impropriety with children.
Yeah, well, there's a rule in government that if a story rolls on for over 7 days, then they have to take action.
7 days.
And so I think, right now with Peter Mandelson, Lord Mandelson, as he is at the moment, they will slap him on the wrist. He may lose his peerage. they don't really want the government, I would say, from a political stance, don't really want too many people looking into the full circumstances behind something like this to have a court at the same time, because it just adds another nail in the coffin for Starmer. I mean, everybody is wondering at the moment what's going to happen on in May after the local elections, and if there is such a bad response by the British public to the Starmer government, all hell is going to break loose anyway. But the last thing that Starmer wants at the moment wants any more intrigue about Mandelstam in any way, shape, or form. And in some ways, ironically, probably happy that this Andrews story is taking the headlines and takes the heat off them.
Yeah, it's all quite juicy though, and again, the Daily Mirror would be really rocketing along with this stuff. What do you think is going to happen in the future? Do you think? I mean, look at Mandelstam, for example. Does he lose his peerage and move in, rents a room from Andrew, or vice versa? Because they could almost compare notes. Or does the government just roll over this? Hopefully, roll over it. Does the monarchy just roll over this? Does the Met, which has a terrible record of with solving crimes, do they just roll over it, or do you think there are some surprises? Because Nigel Farage said other names will be coming out, and he sort of want to hope that his name is not one of them. Although for him to say that, you probably think he's fairly safe there. But if there are other names to come out, well, this thing could gather some air, could move forward a bit more, or do you think it's just going to, as I said, roll over and just fizzle out?
No, I don't think it's allowed, quite honestly. I think basically the media sent blood now, and this is going to be sort of something. I mean, on the 4th of July this year, I'll be celebrating 60 years as a journalist. I've seen everything, in my time in politics as well. Uh, and I remember previous court cases of the past that went on for months, even years, that ended up at the Old Bailey. Who knows what's going to really happen at the moment, because this government is teetering on the edge of collapse anyway. The royal family may be teetering on the collapse as well, because I think more and more people are saying that Charles should leave the becoming king and give it to William, a more modern look. There is so much intrigue going on at the moment. It is a guessing game. It's as simple as that. The things that I hear behind the scenes about what Andrew was happening, how much money he's got, all the alleged businesses that he's got across the world, the palace that he's been offered in Abu Dhabi for him to retire to with Sarah. Who knows? Even visit him there as well. So it is these times when uh, people like myself, people like yourself, it keeps us in a job because we just.
Yeah, I agree. It does keep us in a job, but we've seen other you and I have seen other scandals, but this one sort of includes the whole world and the elite or government in many countries. And if Nigel is right, part of the part that I find interesting is the names. Release these names and see who else is implicated. We may get shocked. And a senator in the US has said that she's seen the names, and that the names are shocking. So who knows? And a lot of these names will be innocent too. So you don't want to tarnish and kill their reputation. So what do you do? Who knows? Lovely chatting with you, by the way. If somebody wants to find out more about Ian Pelham-Turner, and your knowledge is second to none, and your appraisals is just fantastic, how do they do that?
It's just Google me. I mean, there's all sorts of ways of contacting me, quite honestly. And I say, I mean, these days I'm an open book. Just Google my name, and there's all sorts of contact details, especially on LinkedIn as well, how to get hold of me.
Ian, thank you so much for your time. All the best. Hopefully you won't stay awake all night wondering what's going to happen the next day. But good luck with it anyway. Ian Pelham-Turner there from London. This is The World Today.
With the latest information and analysis of major events from around the world, this is today's News Talk, The World Today.
And welcome back to The World Today. Nice to have your company. I can't wait for the weekend, and I'm sure our next guest also can't wait for the weekend, but he's really tied up in politics right now. Aaron Brand began his political life with UKIP, becoming young Conservative chairman for Tunbridge Wells. Now, Aaron is on the National Committee for the English Democrats and is the Kent area chairman. Aaron, thanks for joining us.
Hello, Mike. Thank you very much for having me on.
I have to ask you, how cold is it at the moment?
It was incredibly cold when I went outside this morning, but that is just typical English weather.
Tell me about the English Democrats and how they are different.
Well, so the English Democrats are the only actual political party that is pro-English nationalism. So your Reform, even Restore, is still only a unionist party. Reform is a version of the Conservative Party now, but for example, the English Democrats is pro having a referendum to remove us from the union, and which before it had started with having a English Parliament, but Robin quickly worked out that it would not function having an English Parliament.
Why did you join the English Democrats?
That's a good question. So I was introduced to Robin by a friend, and I saw it as the only party that was pro England, really. And as I think you must have seen, there's been a lot of support for England over the last few months, with the raising of the flags. Lots of councils and things are really unhappy about it. Some of the local councillors in my area were complaining that residents are upset about seeing the England flag flying on lampposts, which I can't see how it's doing any harm to anybody.
Can you tell me your thoughts on the policies, and what are they, of the Starmer or the Labor government that most undermined UK independence?
Well, for example, if you look at what they're doing now, they're starting to bring back freedom of movement through students and things in post Brexit, which is just going to snowball into free movement again throughout the European Union, and then back into it totally, which is what he's been doing in the last few weeks. But he's always been adamant to bring us back into Europe.
I'm just pushing buttons here behind the scenes. It's because we have Robin on all the time, and he's very he's very straight up and down, very, very proud of his country. Where do you see the UK heading if Starmer, he's got the elections in May, of course, so that's going to create some interest. But regardless of whether he stays or not, Labor stays, and they will still be in government for another 3 years at least. Catherine Blakelock yesterday suggested that perhaps they have the possibility of voting to extend that for another 2 more years after that, which is just horrific. But just say, looking at the 3 years down the track before the next general election, how do you see the UK looking, say, from now to then?
Well, it's going to be atrocious. If you look at the the kind of policies they've been bringing in with surveillance and things is just going to continue to get worse and worse. On Catherine Blakelock's point about extending it, I think it was a law that was passed in 1701, I believe, which brought it. I might be wrong, but it was to change the system from 7 years to 5 years, which could easily be changed, and then you have them till 2031, because the Labour Party doesn't have any, like the Tories had, with the 1922 committee. The Labour Party doesn't have anything like that to bring down a sitting government, so it would have to be a vote of no confidence, which most of the Labour MPs are very have no experience of things, and then are not going to risk their one term in office with bringing down Starmer. But from looking at the stuff with Mandelson, who obviously should be in jail, but even if he does, even if they do bring charges against him and things, he would probably only get a slap on the wrist, really. What we've seen from the Epstein files, it looks like there's serious insider trading and things. Which, if me or you or Robin or someone had done similar things, we'd get 25 years.
And a good whipping, or they remove our heads.
Yes.
Could I just ask you your thoughts on former Prince Andrew, whisked down to the police station, and then no charges. He was arrested, no charges, so he can't be arrested. So somewhere along the line, the information's getting garbled. What's your understanding of what's happening at the moment with former Prince Andrew?
Well, it looked like I think I was told he was arrested about 1 o'clock ish. I think that's when I got a notification for it, maybe earlier, yesterday. But so I think they should have, if they were going to charge him, they should have held him for the pre-exit period. But I did find the photo that they released when he came out of the jail quite amusing, where he looked very dishevelled. But I imagine from his experience of being a royal, going in and being treated like anybody else is going to be quite eye-opening, because there'd be no bowing or scraping or
nothing
Your
like
Royal
that.
Highness. But
Fergie, she hung around. She's in the UAE at the moment.
sorry, I missed that.
I mean, the ex-wife that shares, they used to share the 30-room mansion, but she hopped on the first boat out and went over to the UAE, and probably in Dubai.
Well, Dubai does seem to be a place that people flee to. Not that I would want to.
No, it's a nice place, Dubai. I really like it. But I mean, you would have thought she would have hung around, and there's all sorts of thoughts going through my mind. But I can't afford their solicitors' fees, so I'm not going to say anything. But it's a very interesting scenario. And do you think that's going to undermine? I mean, already I think many people are just fed up with the royals. But do you think it will undermine the royals even more?
Oh yes, 100%. I was talking to a friend yesterday, and I said if I was the king, I'd probably just come out and hang him. I reckon that's the only way that would have restored. Obviously controversial, and I don't think that would actually happen. But I think that's one of the only ways you would actually restore the monarchy. You see so many people now that are anti-monarchists, and even people on the right fed up with it.
So you're thinking a good hanging would restore confidence?
I thought,
Well, I like the old days. I mean, this is where I miss your culture. I mean, in the old days, you used to chop the heads off. I mean, and those are the days that we all miss, especially now that we have former Prince Andrew, and he's in a lot of trouble. But did you notice there's nothing on the sex stuff? It's all documents and all that sort of stuff. The sex stuff is highly salacious, and it's abhorrent. I mean, these people should be investigated fully. And we had somebody on earlier said that the US may invite him over to the US for a few questions. That's not going to happen. They've done nothing to anybody in the US. So at the moment, there seems to be no real investigation. No one really wanting the truth, and which also, same thing with the UK. Invite him down, talk about some documents. Don't talk to him about the underage children that people are allegedly making about all of Epstein's cohorts. Nothing like that at all.
Well, that's just been sort of standard. There's been no real investigation or looking into that. To be, I'll give the UK system one piece of credence, that at least they have looked into that. They've done a raid on Mandelson's house. They've arrested the former Prince Andrew. And so it's at least better than what's going on in the States, where the commentator are either just saying it's not worth looking into, or just saying we have now released this. So that's that.
I mean, because we hosted the English cricket team here, which we thumped you guys, but. If you look at that and what's happening with your government, what's happening with your monarchy, they're sort of following the same lines as your cricketers did. It is absolute chaos. And then we have Starmer. He really is quite enthusiastic about the UK or the EU integration. Where do you think that will end? Do you think he'll be happy one day? You'll see him walking into Parliament with some wooden shoes on. I don't know.
That would be quite a thought. But for example, Starmer is a long-term member of the Trilateral Commission, if you've heard of that, which is a group started by one of the Rockefellers to sort of bring countries together, which funnily enough, Epstein is also a member of, but I'm not going to make any links there. But
Robin will look after you if you're sued, by the way, so don't worry about that.
But so he's for and foremost a globalist. He made that quite clear when he was interviewed, and he said he preferred to be in Davos than Westminster. His EU integration. I think he's going to aim for it, but ultimately, I think the EU will collapse in the next 15, 20 years.
Looking at some of the, I mean, no one can miss Nigel Farage, and I always say he's the celebrity game show host in waiting. And he is. I mean, Robin probably sick of hearing that, but that's all I say. But to me, he would be a very poor Prime Minister. That's my thought. So we have then Advance UK, Reform UK. What's the other one? Restore Britain, with which I quite like, actually. Which one of these, because I don't think we'll see Robin as Prime Minister. So which one of these out of Reform UK and Advance UK, at the end of the day, towards the election, will have the most impact on that election?
What, the next general election?
Yes, not the May one, the next general one.
For example, I reckon the Reform and the Tories will merge. And you'll just have if Farage gets in, he'll just have a repeat of the Johnson cabinet, which is just utterly treasonous, and where their idea of getting Brexit done was then to implement their global Britain agenda, which was to instead of having some immigration from Europe, they then massively increased immigration from the third world, which nobody voted for under Brexit. It was the first election I was ever able to vote in. Was the thing I was able to vote in was the referendum on the European Union, which I obviously voted leave. But people were primarily doing it on sovereignty and immigration. So nobody was wanting to have, for example, Polish builders replaced by 300,000 Indians.
That's pretty exciting. How many 100,000? I think we might be exaggerating a titch.
Something
But
over the period, something like that.
Not all in one go. So because we are running out of time, but if Starmer or the Labor Party continue for their 3 years and not what Catherine Blakelock suggests might be another 2 on top of that, if they do the 3 years, do you think if there was a new party that was to become the administration to run the UK, do you think they would have enough, I suppose, guts or gonads or whatever you want to say, to be able to turn back those policies? And secondly, would they be able to turn back those policies?
It depends on which party got in. For example, if Restore got in, I think they would, because they would just utterly go to war with legislation. And like I've spoken to Robin about it, and he has the understanding and the experience to be able to just rip up all of the old Blairite legislation, and so as to help someone like Rupert Lowe in that regard. If Reform gets in, they'll just continue the sort of Blairite tradition we've had since 1997, which is essentially the manifestation of the moralities of Peter Mandelson. But I really hope Reform doesn't get in at this point. I was pleased when Farage got elected in the last general election, but then I quite quickly realised how bad it was. One of the things that hopefully could happen if Starmer is brought down by the Mandelson scandal or various other things, that hopefully a Labour leader might call a general election, but there's no framework and there's nothing there to do that. So that's just sort of pie in the sky, but that's sort of what I'm hoping.
Look, Aaron, thank you very much for spending some time with us. Aaron Brand there. But if somebody wants to find out about what you do or about the English Democrats, how do they do that?
Well, you can go on to the English Democrats website. We have Twitter. We have a YouTube page. I don't think anything's been uploaded for a while. You can go onto my personal Twitter, which is Aaron Brand. Aaron J Brand 1. Or you can go on to Robin.
Robin's got the muskets in his office. We always go to Robin first. And probably a very good bottle of whiskey hiding too. But don't tell him
I've just got an empire.
A pleasure chatting to you. I'll be in trouble next time, I can tell you that. Aaron Brand, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
This is The World Today. And welcome back to The World Today. The notoriety of Israeli prisons is well documented by Palestinian prisoners, less so by the pro-Israeli mainstream media. Some of the prisons are alleged to be sites of torture. A new report entitled Living Hell by the Israeli Information Center for Human Rights in the Occupied Territories described Israeli prisons as a network of torture camps. The report also concludes that Israel's prison authorities, the judiciary and political class are complicit in the systematic abuse and sexual violence. Dr. Frank Romano, a dear friend of ours, is here. He's been to, to enjoy some of the prisons, 4 times, Frank. Thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure, Mike. It's always a pleasure. Even under the circumstances of the theme for today,
it's a terrible
to be
theme
with you. Yeah.
But we do need to talk about it because the violations of human rights is just it's just never ending. Frank, you've been in prison in Israel many times. Tell us about your experiences, and did each one differ?
Absolutely. The first time. The sort of long-term time was when I was living with the Bedouins east of Jerusalem, and there was a bulldozer coming in to destroy this permanent Bedouin town called Kana Akmar, that had a permanent school. They weren't nomads, and so we had no weapons. So we got in front of the bulldozer. Fortunately, the bulldozer was stopped, and even to this day, the town stands, but I was hauled off to Moscovia prison. Moscovia prison is an ignominious example of one of the biggest torturous prisons that exist in Israel, located in Jerusalem. But since I am French-American, I was not put into the torture chamber, but they had another scheme, another twisted scheme, along with all the twisted torturous devices they've used against Palestinians. They thought one up for non-Palestinians. And what they did was they put me in a cell with these probably convicted murderers, Jewish convicted murderers, that knew that I was an activist for Palestine. And within a few minutes, they started beating me up. So I was bloody and beaten, but I resisted and yelled and screamed, made a big scandal. So the guards had to open the door because there were other prisoners listening to this. If I hadn't said anything, or somehow they were to shut me up, I may not have survived it, and finally was released and put in solitary confinement. So the way the Israeli government was going to get rid of me through torture or kill me was to put me in a cell with crazy, Zionist prisoners. That's just one example. The other times, I was interrogated, so forth, after organizing demonstrations in Israel. But the last 2 times where I was in prison for at least a week was after the Hondola, which I'm an owner of, the Freedom Flotilla, on its way to Gaza, was intercepted, and then I was in prison for a week. That was an Israeli prison. I think it was near Tel Aviv, and it was tough conditions, bed bugs, and there were cockroaches, and we were treated like animals, but not. We were on a hunger strike, and it was desperate, but we were at least given water. And we were able to see I was able to see the French consulate. The American consulate completely ignored the American prisoners there. That the second time I was in prison was very recently, only about 4 months ago, when the global Samud flotilla boats were intercepted. Now Ben Gvir made it clear to the press that we were going to be treated like terrorists. And right off the boat, when we were intercepted into the administrative procedure area in Ashdod, Israeli port, we were thrown to the ground, very hot ground. So we were burning, our knees were burning, and we were told to bend over and place our head on the ground. So our foreheads were burning. They were yelling and screaming and pulling at us. And some of us stayed in that position, a terrible position, for over 2 hours. So that was much worse. And then we were hauled off to Kitsiot prison in the Negev desert. And that was a very rough, tough, and rumble place. We continued our hunger strikes. And, we were, we'll talk about this. Happens much more systematically against Palestinians, Mike, but we were deprived of medication and other, things that Israelis and other governments are supposed to comply with Geneva Convention standards in prison.
Frank, I could understand if you went there with some gelignite bombs, machine guns, plutonium, any of that. That would mean that you wanted to do something within Israel. Tell me I would probably think the scariest thing that you guys would have been bringing into the area probably would have been love, and probably some medical supplies and stuff like that. When you're thrown down and threatened, your life is threatened. Of course, your government would come in and help you, wouldn't they? They would be behind you and they would say, you can't treat our citizens like this. Frank Romano is not a terrorist, and we can see that. You're probably an agitator because you have full right to be that, but you are not a terrorist by any stretch of the imagination. To be treated in such a way, can you just rattle off a few examples of where it would contravene international law?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add to what you said about the scariest things that we brought, the Hamdullah was dedicated to children. So that was another scary thing we were bringing. Not arms, not threats, not violence, but baby formula.
Watch out. No, that's pretty deadly. Baby formula. I mean, you'll have the idea. They'll be after you.
Yes. Yeah, the kids are dying, and of course the people are dying of starvation and so forth. Mm-hmm. But to get to the main question here, well, first of all, there's over 9,000 Palestinians in prison, and what I'm going to focus on is the Betzel. Really shown that these twisted Israeli authorities, these Nazi-like authorities, have turned the prison system into a devious network of torture camps, torture chambers. And you could say it's like the coordinated onslaught against like the Palestinian society, almost intended to destroy the existence of this collective. And the genocide in Gaza and the ethnic cleansing in the West Bank are all part of this policy. So there have been many prisoners, young prisoners, and full of life, that have died in prisons. You wonder if these young prisoners have died, over 84 of them, since October 2023. You'd think, what did they do to them once they got into prison? They were subjected to systematic abuse, physical and psychological violence, inhumane conditions, deliberate starvation. There was very limited, if not completely denied, they were completely denied of medical treatment. We want to say that the Article 76 of the Fourth Geneva Convention requires an occupying power's obligation to provide adequate medical care and provide special protection for women and children. And we'll see, that this has not been complied with, and there's been systematic torture. Now, the findings of torture have been based on the testimonies of about 21 Palestinians released from Israeli prisons recently. They described absolutely unbelievable violence, sexual violence in particular in custody, forced stripping, several injuries to genitals, beatings, attacks involving dogs, and penetration with various objects, whether they've been women and children. And now we talked about, Mike, me being on the Samud boat. Well, the last experience where we were on the global Somod Flotilla boats, 44 of them. We were followed by the FFC, a big FFC boat, the Conscience, that, remember, if you recall, was bombed way back in Malta a year or two ago. A German journalist, Anna Ledke, who was aboard the Flotilla Conscience, was raped. She claimed that she was raped after resisting a forced strip search. So it came home to us. It wasn't just the Palestinians. It's mainly Palestinians that are being brutalized, but also some of the people that are on some of these Freedom Flotilla boats, these nonviolent protesters. And then they have this, I think it was referred to, the B'Tselem report, a disco room where electric shocks are administered regularly and where prisoners are deprived of food and access to a toilet. It was unequivocal, according to the B'Tselem report, that Israel is continuing its systematic, institutionalized policy of torture and abuse of Palestinian prisoners, approved and backed by the political system, so the judicial system, because they've been trying to appeal some of these incarcerations and requiring lawyers and trying to get lawyers to represent them. And most of the courts have not allowed for the appeals or even allowed any, even required Palestinian prisoners to benefit from lawyers. And the media is complicit, of course, and the prison authorities themselves. Al Jazeera now has reported as early as late as February 2026 that Israel has transferred 54 Palestinian bodies, right, and human remains to families in Gaza, and there's clear evidence that they were mutilated, and it displayed clear evidence of torture. And so we have that, and now I can talk about minors, Mike, unless you have a question.
No. Just
minors have been treated.
keep going,
Yes.
Frank. I need to hear it.
Yes. Sure. Yeah, like the 2023 report, and there's been more since then, by Save the Children found widespread use of physical, emotional, and even sexual abuse against Palestinian children. It is found that of all the children detained, 86% were beaten, 69 were strip searched, 60% spent time in solitary confinement, 68% were denied any health care, and 58% were denied any visits and communication with family. I mean, it's tough enough for adults to have undergone that, but kids, in February 2025, for example, Israeli authorities detained a kid who's 15 years old. His name was Mohammed Zahar Ibrahim, and he was accused of rock throwing, which allegations his family denied. He was set to be tried by an Israeli military court and was subjected to torture, had no contact with his parents for 8 to 9 months, and if convicted, would have been convicted for up to 20 years, would have been subject to a sentence for up to 20 years in prison. The Convention on Human Rights for Children, ratified by Israel 1991, states that imprisonment of children must only be used as a measure of last resort. But in reality, prison is systematic. It's the most common form of punishment for Palestinian children and is definitely not punishment of last resort. There are no specialized procedures dealing with children for arrest. For instance, at age of 12 years old, Palestinian children can be arrested and subject to the same procedures that adults are. And with all the Palestinian residents of the occupied Palestinian territories, children are tried in military courts. And they're not allowed often lawyers, even to have family or witnesses with them. They can even be held and have been held. The children have been held incommunicado, often in substandard conditions up to 8 days, during which time they have absolutely no access to, and that's when they're first arrested, access to family or lawyers. And they're rarely accorded bail. And if they request anything, normally the court denies it. And so under Article 9 of the International Convention on Civil Political Rights, which Israel ratified in 1991, Israel is required to provide due process in pretrial detention. And Article 14 imposes obligations dealing with the right to, for instance, a fair trial. Clearly, these international standards have been violated with respect to adults and in particular with respect to children. Now, we can talk about administrative detention as well, if you like. And also, I want to talk about when we were in prison and the deprivation of medication. That's to say, the deprivation of access to healthcare and adequate food. We could talk about that as well, Mike.
We have about 7 minutes, so go for it.
Okay. Yes. Just administrative detention has gotten a lot of press already. I don't want to go over and over this, but the overwhelming majority of Palestinian prisoners have been arrested under this quasi-judicial process known as administrative detention, under which Palestinians are initially jailed for 6 months. And their detention can be repeatedly extended for an indefinite period of time without charge or trial. Let me just emphasize this, Mike, without charge or trial. Now, think of it. If you can imagine, and I definitely can imagine it because I was incarcerated at least 4 times in Israel, not knowing you're incarcerated, you're behind 4 walls, you're just sitting there in often a cold and abandoned cell with cockroaches and bed bugs and who knows what else. And you have no idea when you'll go to trial, when you'll be released. You think that maybe you'll never leave this place. Administrative detention orders are issued on the basis of secret evidence, and often legal counsel has no access to it. Detainees cannot properly defend themselves. That's a manifest violation of due process rights under Article 9 of the International Convention of Civil and Political Rights, violation of the Fourth Geneva Convention that contains several provisions providing for due process and administrative justice guarantees. And it says willfully depriving a protected person of the rights of fair and regular trial is clear violation. And now, finally, before I conclude, access to health care. I mean, when I was in prison, it was only a few months ago, there was an 80-year-old man who was with us, and this is the Global Summit Flotilla again, where 44 boats were intercepted, and over 400 people were detained, including myself, for over a week. An 80-year-old man needed insulin. He was a diabetic and could have died. And the Israeli authorities, the guards, and the authorities themselves prevented him from access to insulin, even though said that we would be medicated, and waited 3 days until this person was in dire straits. When finally we yelled and screamed and made mayhem in prison, and finally he was allowed to be medicated. Not to mention there was an influencer with us, a young man who had extreme anxiety attacks, and yelling and screaming like a madman, and was not given his medication. Under Article 76 of the Fourth Geneva Convention, occupying power's obligation to provide adequate medical care absolutely violated, as violated systematically with respect to Palestinians. But thinking of all the deaths of the prisoner, you know that most of those deaths were caused by the lack of proper medical attention that they are deprived of. So clear international standards are being violated. In conclusion, the findings have confirmed B'Tselem and other findings that the pattern of abuse already highlighted in the report, and the report that you mentioned, Mike, report called Welcome to Hell, states, despite mounting evidence and numerous reports on Israeli torture camps, the international community continues to grant this regime full immunity, effectively legitimizing the continued torture, oppression, and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians and abandoning the victims.
And don't forget, since I think October 2023, I think 84 Palestinians have died in Israeli custody as a result of torture and denial of medical treatment. Just one more thing. We've got about 2 minutes to go. What's your thoughts on the death penalty law that the Israeli government is currently advancing? That's going to be another tool in Israel's hands to kill Palestinians.
Absolutely, and making the plans for the execution of possibly hundreds of prisoners is is beyond frightening, because if the Palestinians are given their due process rights as they're not given now, could you imagine you're in prison and you've been accused of serious crimes, but you're not getting a fair trial, which most likely they won't, as what's happening now. And now Israel is allowed the death sentence, which means you can be executed just maybe after a very, like a kangaroo court. Execution could be forthcoming. And you might be not allowed to have proper representation, most likely not. And it will be expedited. Can you imagine? Normally in regular, in any country, a death sentence accusation, normally the trial goes on for a while and the evidence provided. Can you imagine a kangaroo court now allowed to condemn Palestinians for death sentences? And of course, we have Ben Gvir in the back applauding this. It's very, very unsettling and the risk of many Palestinians being executed now without a fair trial, without due process.
It's very disturbing. And we do need to talk more about this and probably even get into greater detail. Frank, if somebody wants to find out more about you, how do they do that?
No, just Frank Romano, Love and Terror 5, or Frank Romano, just put in Palestine, or Frank Romano, Freedom Flotilla, or Sumud, and I'm there everywhere, Instagram, Facebook, and so forth, and there'll be places where people can access communication with me, and I welcome that.
Frank, it's I won't say it was a pleasure, but thank you for coming on. What you've told us is disturbing, and we do need to do more. And it sort of gets right up my calackers, the hot air that that was out there a few months ago, and at the moment, I think the world. Excuse my French here. It's not French, but I think the world at the moment is pretty piss weak. That's what I think. That's just my humble opinion. So I apologise for saying rude words, and I'm sure you've heard worse. But it is the world at the moment needs to do a lot more, and
you could say a lot worse and be quite relevant to this. And it's just so skewed now with the complicity of the world. It's just unbelievable, and especially talking with prisoners that are completely helpless.
Yep, it's terrible. Mankind should not treat humans this way. Frank Romano, Dr. Frank Romano, thank you very much. We'll do this again very shortly. That's it for the week. That's it for the world today. Have a great weekend. Tomorrow in Queensland, it's going to be about 30 degrees, sunshine. The pool looks great. The barbecue, I can smell the barbecue cooking at the moment, and a couple of reds or a scotch. That's my weekend. I hope you have a good one too. I believe where Frank is at the moment, it's a bit cool, so Frank will be eating in. This is The World Today.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.